You're so beautiful, my dear. Why can't you be like your twin sister? Can't you see how everything works for her?
They always chose my sister. Every time. Without fail, without apology. As if I was born simply to stand beside Cynthia and make her shine brighter by comparison. I remember the exact moment I stopped being a child and became a wind. I was 14 years old, our uncle's funeral, in the kind of gathering where the whole extended family comes together. Women in matching Ankara, men in the agbada, children running between legs like small forgotten things. I had spent 3 days helping Mama cook, 3 days of my hands smelling like ogiri and palm oil, of my back aching from stirring enormous pots, of my eyes burning from smoke. 3 whole days. And when Auntie Ngozi stood up during the gathering to speak about the children who have made this family proud, she looked directly at Cynthia and smiled. Ah, this Cynthia, fine girl, brilliant girl, see how she carries herself. God has blessed you, Sister Ada. She did not look at me. Not once. I was standing right there, directly beside my twin sister, close enough that our shoulders were touching. But Auntie Ngozi looked through me like I was glass, like I was air, like the empty space between something beautiful and something else. I did not cry. I had already learned by 14 that crying for things like this only made adults uncomfortable and annoyed. Instead, I felt something shift inside my chest, not dramatically, not like in the movies, but quietly, like a small stone sliding down to the bottom of a deep well, a soft, distant plop, and then silence. That was the sound of me deciding something. I just did not know what I had decided yet. Cynthia and I came from the same womb, the same minute. She arrived first, I arrived 3 minutes later, and apparently those 3 minutes changed everything. 3 minutes gave her the laugh that filled rooms. 3 minutes gave her the skin that caught light differently, the voice that adults turn toward automatically, the way you turn toward warmth without thinking. I used to study her, not with jealousy, or maybe it was. Maybe I was lying to myself even then, but with a kind of desperate curiosity. What does she have that I don't have? We shared the same face roughly, same nose, same jawline, same dark eyes, but on her, those features arranged themselves into something the world wanted to look at. On me, they were just features. Mama loved us both. I believe that. I need to believe that. But loving two children equally and treating them equally, those are two different things, and I learned the difference early. When Cynthia brought home a good result, Mama would put it on the wall. When I brought home the same result, sometimes better, she would say, good, put it on the table. The table, not the wall, the table where things get buried under other things. Papa was kinder in his way. He would call me my quiet one and pat my head with a large, gentle hand. But even kindness, when it is attached to an explanation, the quiet one, the serious one, the other one, becomes its own kind of distance. Why can't you be more like your sister? I heard that sentence so many times growing up that it stopped piercing me. It became background noise. The way traffic outside a window becomes background noise. You stop hearing it consciously, but it never really leaves. It shapes you in ways you don't notice until one day you look in the mirror and realize the person looking back has been quietly forming herself around an absence. I had formed myself around that absence. Secondary school was Cynthia's stage, and I was part of the scenery. She was the one the boys gathered around during break time, the one the teachers called on when they wanted an enthusiastic answer, the one who was nominated for every school event, cultural day, inter-house sports, debate competition. She was not cruel about it. That is the complicated thing I have to say about my sister. She was never deliberately cruel to me. She did not step on me to rise. She simply rose, and I happened to be standing nearby, and nobody noticed the difference. The cruelty came from everyone else. Cousins who would say in front of me, "Cynthia is the beautiful one." Teachers who called her name first in registers, even though mine came before hers alphabetically, because I was Mirabel and she was Cynthia, and even syllables seemed to prefer her. The women in church who would hold her face between their palms and say, "God was in a good mood when he made you," as if God was distracted when he made me, as if I had arrived during a coffee break. I started to go quiet. Not the strategic quiet I would learn later, the defeated quiet. The kind of quiet that is actually a small person making themselves smaller, hoping that if they reduce themselves enough, the comparisons will stop because there will be nothing left to compare. They did not stop. By the time I finished secondary school and we were preparing for university, I had already made a decision I could not fully name yet. Something in me had hardened, not into bitterness, though that would come and go, but into determination. A quiet, grinding, patient determination. The kind that does not announce itself. The kind that works in dark rooms while everyone else is sleeping. Cynthia got into University of Lagos to study mass communication. The family celebrated for a week. There was a small party. Auntie Ngozi came with a wrapper as a gift. I got into University of Lagos the same week to study business administration. Mama made me my favorite soup, ofe akun, and said, "We are proud of you, Mirabel." We. The soup was delicious. I ate it alone in my room, and the stone in my chest slid a little further down. University changed Cynthia, and it changed me, but not in the ways anyone expected. Cynthia bloomed the way flowers bloom when you move them from a small window to open sunlight. Suddenly, explosively, with color that surprises even the plant itself. She found her people immediately. Her social media began filling up with pictures at parties, at events, on beach trips, her face always arranged into that perfect expression that reads as effortless happiness. She had a boyfriend within 3 months, a tall, light-skinned boy named Emeka who wore expensive cologne and drove his father's car. The family approved even from a distance. I did something different. I started reading. Not textbooks, I read those too, but I mean reading. Business books, stories of people who built things from nothing, biographies of women who started with no name and carved their names so deep into stone that the world had no choice but to read them. I read about market strategies, about branding, about how money moves and why it moves towards certain people and away from others. I read in the library while Cynthia was at parties. I read in the hostel corridor at night with a small torch when the generator went off. I read on buses and in queues and in every pocket of time that other people threw away. And I started to do. Small things at first. I noticed that the girls in my hostel were always running out of certain things, sanitary products, skincare, hair supplies, and that the campus shops charged too much for them. So I started sourcing them cheaply from a market I found 40 minutes away and selling them quietly, door to door, small margins. Nobody called it a business. I did not call it a business, but I kept a small notebook and I tracked every naira in and every naira out. And by the end of my first year, I had saved more money than most of my classmates had in total. I kept that notebook hidden. I kept everything hidden. This is something I learned early that took me years to understand fully. Visibility is a privilege, but invisibility is a weapon. When they cannot see what you are building, they cannot mock it. They cannot discourage you. They cannot plant doubt in your soil. The people who had spent my whole childhood telling me I was less than my sister, they had that power because I was standing where they could see me, letting their words reach me. Now I was building in a room with no windows, and their words were falling on an empty street. By my second year, I had expanded. I had 3 girls selling for me. I had moved from personal items into small wholesale trading, Ankara fabric, phone accessories, student supplies. Nothing glamorous, but everything deliberate. Everything tracked in my notebook, which had become 2 notebooks, which had become a small binder. I had a business partner briefly, a girl named Hawa from Kaduna, sharp and funny and allergic to nonsense. She and I sat in the campus canteen one afternoon, and she looked at my binder and said, "Mirabel, you are sitting on something serious. You know that, right?" I knew. I just was not ready for anyone else to know. My grades were excellent, not because I was doing nothing else, but because I had learned that excellence is not about talent, it is about attention. I paid attention in class the way I paid attention to everything, quietly, completely, missing nothing. Professors who did not know my name by the first month knew it by the third because my work spoke in a voice I had not yet found in person. Cynthia graduated with a second class lower. The family said it was fine. She had done well. The important thing was she had a degree. They gave her a party. I graduated with a first class. Mama cried. At the party, smaller than Cynthia's had been, I noticed, though I said nothing. Auntie Ngozi pulled me aside and said, "You see, when you put your head down and walk, things happen. Maybe now a good man will look at you." A good man. That was the reward she was offering me for a first-class degree. The prospect of male attention. I smiled at her. I had learned to smile at things that would have broken me at 14. I smiled and I thought, you have no idea what I am building. Not the smallest idea. I moved to Lagos after NYSC with 45,000 naira in savings and a business plan I had been refining for 2 years. Cynthia was already in Lagos by then. She had married Emeka, the light-skinned boy with the cologne, in a wedding that sent the family into raptures. The ceremony was in a hotel in Victoria Island. There were asoebi in 3 colors. There was a live band and a DJ, and a photo booth with props. The family said it was the most beautiful thing they had ever seen. I was a bridesmaid. I carried a bouquet and stood where I was placed and smiled when the photographer pointed the camera. In the photographs, if you look carefully, you can see the determination in my eyes. Not bitterness, not envy. Determination. Emeka came from a wealthy family. His father had interests in real estate and logistics. Cynthia stepped into a life of ease, a nice apartment in Lekki, a car, a lifestyle that looked extraordinary on Instagram. She posted constantly, every meal, every trip, every outfit. The family followed her account and commented with hearts and praying hands emojis and sent her posts to each other on WhatsApp groups with messages like, "Our daughter is living well, oh, God is faithful." They stopped asking about me within 6 months. I moved into a small, stuffy one-room apartment in Yaba with a ceiling fan that made a sound like it was considering giving up. I worked 16 hours some days. I made mistakes that cost me money, and then I corrected those mistakes, and they cost me less. I found a business partner, a calm, analytical man named Tunde, who understood supply chains the way I understood people. We started a distribution business for fast-moving consumer goods, supplying to small retailers across Lagos. I did not tell my family. I did not post on social media. I simply worked. The first year nearly broke me. I will not lie and make this story into a smooth, inspiring line from struggle to success. There were nights I sat on my narrow mattress with my back against the wall and the ceiling fan complaining above me, and I thought, what if they were right? What if you are just the other one? What if you have been fooling yourself all this time? Those nights were real. They are part of this story. But here is what I had that I did not have at 14. I had the discipline to stay in the room with those thoughts without running from them and without surrendering to them. I had learned to sit with darkness the way you sit with an elder, respectfully, patiently, without flinching, waiting for them to finish so you can continue. The thoughts would come, I would sit with them, and then I would open my notebook. The numbers were real, the business was real. The progress was slow, but it was measurable, and I could see it, and it was mine, not borrowed from anyone's praise, not dependent on anyone's perception, not subject to revision by anyone's opinion. By the third year, we had 12 retail clients. By the fourth, 30. By the fifth year, I had a proper office in Ikeja, 3 full-time staff, a client list of over 80 businesses, and a net revenue that I will not state here because it is not the number that matters. What matters is what the number represented. Proof. Not proof for them, proof for me. Proof that the stone that sank to the bottom of that deep well at 14 was not dead weight. It was a foundation. I bought a car. A quiet, reliable car, not flashy. I upgraded my apartment, still modest, but mine, fully mine. And I waited. I had learned patience the way some people learn prayer, desperately, faithfully, as a survival tool that became a spiritual practice. I waited for the moment. It was coming. I could feel it the way you feel rain before it arrives, a change in the air, a heaviness, a knowing.
The invitation came from Mama in October. Uncle Chukuma's 60th birthday, the same uncle whose funeral 16 years earlier had been the stage for my first real understanding of invisibility. Now he was alive and 60, and the family was gathering in Enugu for a celebration. Auntie Ngozi had organized everything. There would be a hall, a band, a full party. The entire extended family coming in from Lagos and Abuja and Port Harcourt and diaspora. The kind of event where the family presents itself to itself, where the years of births and marriages and achievements are put on display and examined and praised or quietly judged. Cynthia called me about it the week before. Her voice had a quality I had noticed developing over the past year. A tightness beneath the brightness, like a fabric that has been stretched slightly too far for slightly too long, not torn yet, but on the edge of something. "Are you coming?" she asked. "Yes," I said. "Good. It will be nice. It has been a while." It had been almost 8 months since I had seen her in person. Our relationship had settled into something distant, but not hostile. Birthday calls, occasional WhatsApp messages, the performative closeness of siblings who have accepted that they are strangers to each other. I did not resent her for it. We had grown into different shapes in different soils, and the distance was honest. But her voice that day, I heard something in it that I filed away. I drove to Enugu alone. I had considered what to wear for longer than I usually spend on such things, and I had eventually chosen something simple, a deep green wrapper blouse and trousers, well-tailored, quiet, good shoes, no excessive jewelry. I wanted to look like exactly what I was, a woman who no longer needed anyone's validation, but who had arrived, quietly and completely in herself. I arrived at the hall 40 minutes after the start time. Nigerian events run late. Arriving at the actual start time means you are sitting alone with the waiters. And I found the gathering already warm and loud, the band playing at a polite volume, round tables filled with family members in their asoebi of champagne and gold. Cynthia was at the center of it all, as she always was. She was wearing a gold gilly that sat on her head like a crown. Her dress stunning, her makeup perfect. Emeka stood beside her in a well-cut agbada, one hand at the small of her back in the pose of a devoted husband. The family surrounded them in a loose, admiring cluster, aunts reaching up to touch her face, uncles shaking Emeka's hand with the reverence reserved for men who have money. I watched from the entrance for a moment before I walked in. Nobody turned when I entered. It was fine. I straightened my back and walked toward the table where Mama was seated. Mama saw me and stood immediately, her face opening in that way only a mother's face opens, complete, unperformed happiness. Mirabel, my daughter. She held me for a long moment, and I held her back, and I breathed in the familiar smell of her, shea butter and something floral, the same since childhood. You look well, she said, pulling back to look at me. You look, she paused, searching for the word, different. Good different or bad different? She laughed. Wonderful different. I sat beside her. Around us, conversations continued uninterrupted. A few cousins acknowledged me with nods and small smiles. Auntie Ngozi bustled past, caught my eye, said, Mirabel, you came, as though my attendance was a pleasant surprise, and then continued to the more important business of whatever she had been going toward. I ate my food, I observed, I was patient. The first crack appeared around the 3rd hour. I noticed it before anyone else because I had been watching Cynthia. Not obsessively, just the way you watch a weather system you have been tracking for a long time, alert to changes. Her voice laughed too quickly at things that were not quite funny. Her eyes checked her phone every few minutes, then checked Emeka, then checked the door. Emeka, for his part, was charming and social and attentive in the performed way of a man who is managing a situation. He brought her a drink with a smile. She thanked him with a smile. The smiles did not reach either of their eyes. Something was wrong between them. I had suspected it for months. Small things, the kind of small things you notice when you have learned to watch carefully. The way her posts have shifted over the past year, moving from pictures of the two of them to pictures of her alone, dressed beautifully with captions about choosing yourself and your peace is everything, the language of women preparing for a departure they have not yet announced. But I did not know how wrong things were until the phone landed on the table. It was Emeka's phone. It slid from the inside pocket of his agbada, a clumsy, ordinary accident, the kind that happens at parties, and landed face up on the table with the screen still lit for the 2 seconds before the screen darkened. But those 2 seconds were enough because they were enough for Cynthia, who was sitting right beside him, and they were enough for Auntie Ngozi, who was reaching across the table at that exact moment for the chin-chin bowl. I was 3 tables away. I did not see the message, but I saw Cynthia's face. I had known my sister's face for 30 years. I had watched it in joy and in jealousy and in triumph and in sleep. I knew every arrangement of it. And the arrangement that came over it in those 2 seconds, the way everything went still, the way the brightness drained from her eyes like water draining from a bath, leaving something hollow and confirmed, that arrangement told me the story as clearly as words. She had suspected. Now she knew. Emeka noticed her face. He picked up the phone quickly, too quickly, and put it back in his pocket. His hand went to her back again, a reflex, automatic, meaningless. Cynthia moved away from his hand. The table around them continued its noise for a few more seconds, oblivious. Then Auntie Ngozi, whose face had also registered something, whose eyes were now holding a question she did not yet know how to ask, said carefully, Cynthia, are you all right? And Cynthia said in a voice as flat and cold as a concrete floor, I am fine. But she was not fine, and the night was just beginning.
What happened next did not happen the way it happens in films. There was no dramatic music. Nobody stood up and screamed. The ceiling did not crack open. It happened the way the worst things happen in real life. Slowly, then all at once, with a quiet that was more devastating than any noise could have been. Cynthia stood up from the table, calmly, deliberately, with her gele perfectly straight and her dress perfectly fitted and her face wearing an expression I had never seen on her before. An expression that was not grief and not anger, but something beyond both. Something that lives on the other side of the moment when a person's last doubt is removed and they are left with only the clean, terrible clarity of truth. She walked to where Emeka was standing with a group of men, Uncle Chokuma's friends, big men in their 60s, the kind of men who are accustomed to commanding rooms. She stood in front of her husband. She held out her hand. Emeka looked at her hand, looked at her face, looked at the men around him. "Your phone," she said. Her voice was quiet, completely quiet, the kind of quiet that cuts. "Emeka, your phone, Emeka." Something in her voice, the absolute, unmovable stillness of it, made the men step back slightly, made the room around them begin to soften its noise, conversations dropping in volume the way they do when people sense something happening nearby that they should not look at but cannot stop looking at. Emeka handed her the phone. I think he calculated in that moment that resistance would be worse. I think he told himself she would not do what she was about to do in this room full of family. I think he bet on her pride protecting him. He did not know his wife the way I knew my sister. Cynthia looked at the phone. Her tongue moved across it, unhurried. The room had gone almost completely quiet now. The band still playing softly in the background, but every conversation within range had stopped. People pretending to look elsewhere while looking directly at the scene unfolding. Then she turned the phone around and held it up. Not at anyone in particular, just up, into the air of the room where everyone could see it. The screen showed a message thread. I was too far to read it, but I could see Emeka's face, and I could see Aunty Ngozi's face, and I could see Mama reach over and take my hand without realizing she had done it. "Is this her?" Cynthia asked. Her voice was still quiet, still completely still. Emeka said nothing. "Emeka, is this her?" "Cynthia, this is not the place." "My husband." She lowered the phone. She looked at him fully, completely, the way you look at something you are memorizing because you will not be looking at it again. "How long?" He said nothing. "How long?" The silence that followed was the loudest thing I have ever had in my life. It filled the hall like smoke fills a room, finding every corner, every gap, every space where sound had been. Then Emeka said quietly, "We can talk about this at home." And Cynthia said even more quietly, "There is no home to go back to." She handed him his phone. She turned around. She walked back to her table, sat down, picked up her glass of juice and drank it. Around her, the family was in shock. Aunty Ngozi was holding her hand to her chest like something had struck her there. The big men where Emeka had been standing had dispersed, moving away with the careful speed of people who need not to have witnessed what they witnessed. Emeka stood alone for a moment, visibly diminished. The cologne and the agbada and all the resources of his background suddenly just fabric on a man who had nowhere to put himself. Then he walked out of the hall. The band, bless them, kept playing. The family's response came in stages. First, shock. 10 minutes of urgent, hushed conversations at tables. People leaning toward each other, phones coming out, faces going through expressions too complex to name. Second, the gathering of the women. Aunty Ngozi, 3 other aunts, 2 older cousins. They converged on Cynthia like a weather system, pulling chairs close, lowering voices, hands on her back and her arms. I could see from across the room what they were saying without even hearing it. The language of women managing crisis, containing damage, asking careful questions about what was true and what could be managed. Third, and this is the thing I need you to understand, was the most revealing. Within 20 minutes, the conversation among the family had moved from, "This is terrible, our sister is hurting," to, "But what did she do to make him stray? These things don't happen without a reason." I heard it from 3 mouths before I had fully crossed the room. She was always too focused on herself, that one. You cannot be posting yourself on social media every day and expect your husband to feel valued. I always said they married too fast. I stood at the edge of the group and I listened, and something that had been quiet in me for a very long time began, very slowly, to move. Mama had not released my hand since the silence. She held it now as we stood slightly apart from the gathering, her warm, small hand wrapped around mine, and she was watching Cynthia with an expression that was pure maternal pain. That pain was real, and I did not question it. I felt it too, but I was also feeling something else. Because here is what I was watching. The same family that had spent 30 years making Cynthia the gold standard, the measuring stick, the proof of what a woman should be, they were turning on her within 20 minutes. Not to comfort, to assign blame, to find the reason, which was always the woman's reason in their mouths. And here is what else I was watching. Nobody had looked at me in this hall in the same way I had not been looked at in every hall my entire life. I was still the other one, but now the gold had cracked and I was watching them realize they had been praising a surface. Miradel, Mama said. I know, Mama. Don't say anything. I won't. But even as I said it, I knew it was not fully true. Because Auntie Ngozi was now standing up and saying, in the carrying voice of a woman who has appointed herself the moral authority of every room she enters, the truth is, a woman who knows how to keep her home does not find herself in this situation. I am not saying it is Cynthia's fault, but I am saying she should have known better. And something in me stood up. Not loudly, not violently, but completely.
I walked to the center of the room, not rushing, not performing. I simply crossed the floor, and something in the way I moved, the years of it, the patience, the quiet building, and the quiet waiting came with me. I had been told my entire life that I moved through rooms without being noticed. That night, for the first time, I felt people notice. I stopped beside Auntie Ngozi. She turned and looked at me, a brief, slightly dismissive look. What does she want? That I recognized from childhood, from 1,000 moments. Auntie Ngozi, I said, I need to say something. Mirabelle, this is not the time. I know, I said, it is long overdue. The room was quiet enough now that my voice carried. I was not shouting. I was not trembling. I was simply speaking, the way I had been speaking in offices and meeting rooms and across negotiating tables for the past several years. The voice I had built from nothing, word by patient word. For 30 years, I said, this family chose my sister. Every time, without question. Cynthia was the one who was celebrated, praised, shown off. Cynthia was the measuring stick by which I was found lacking. Why can't you be like your sister? How many times did I hear that? How many rooms did I walk into and become invisible? A stillness in the room. I continued. I am not saying this to wound my sister. I love Cynthia, and what happened tonight is not her failure. It is her husband's. But I am watching you, right now, 20 minutes after she has been humiliated publicly, turn around and ask what she did wrong. The same people who spent years worshipping everything about her life are already looking for the way this is her fault. Auntie Ngozi made a sound, beginning to interrupt. I am not finished, I said. She stopped. While you were all watching Cynthia's Instagram and calling her a success story, I was in Yaba in a one-room apartment building a business. I did not tell you. I did not post about it because I had learned from this family that my achievements were not the kind that deserved to be seen. So I built in the quiet. I built without asking for your validation because I had long accepted that it was not coming. I paused. I looked around the room, at Mama, whose eyes were full, at Cynthia, sitting very still at her table, watching me with an expression I had never seen on her face before, open, and something that looked like the beginning of understanding, at my cousins, who had the grace to look uncomfortable. I am not standing here to brag. I am standing here because my sister is in pain, and the people who should be holding her are already finding ways to make it her fault. My voice remained steady throughout. That steadiness was the result of years of sitting with hard things and not breaking. The business I built serves 83 retail clients across Lagos. I have 6 employees. I own my apartment. I own my car. I did not do these things for your praise. I am telling you now, only so you understand that while you are measuring me against my sister and finding me less, I was building something real, something that does not depend on a husband's faithfulness or a family's approval or a social media image to keep standing. I turned to Aunty Ngozi. Cynthia did nothing wrong by wanting to be loved. She is my sister, and she deserves better than what happened tonight and better than what you just said about her. And I deserve better than 30 years of being the invisible one. Then I turned to the room. We all deserve better than worshipping appearances and dismissing substance. I hope tonight teaches us something. I hope it is not too expensive a lesson. I stepped back. I did not sit down dramatically. I did not wait for applause. I walked back to where Mama was sitting and I sat beside her and I picked up my glass of water and drank it. The silence lasted a long time. Long enough for it to mean something, long enough for the people in that room to sit with what I had said without the comfort of noise to distract them. Then Cynthia stood up. She crossed the room. She sat down beside me. For a moment, she said nothing. We sat side by side, the same way we had sat side by side our entire lives, close enough to touch, each in our own world. The band had stopped now. The night had changed into something nobody had planned for. Mirabel, she said. Yes? I didn't know. I looked at her. Her gele had been removed at some point. It sat on the table, and without it, she looked younger, more like the girl I had grown up beside before all the performance settled over her like a second skin. You didn't want to know, I said. Not unkindly, just truthfully. She absorbed that. The business, she said. You really built all that? I really built all that. She was quiet for a long moment. Then, I used to feel guilty sometimes when they compared us, and I could see you. I could see it landing on you. But I didn't know how to make it stop without losing the thing they were giving me. And I liked it, Mirabel. I liked being the one they chose. I am not going to lie to you. I know, I said. I never hated you for it. Maybe you should have. Maybe, but I used it differently. She looked at me then, really looked at me, the way sometimes sisters look at each other across years of complicated history and see the person beneath all the family mythology. And in her eyes, I saw something shift, something that was not pity and not guilt and not even admiration exactly, but something more fundamental, recognition. The recognition of one woman seeing another and saying, I see what you are made of. You are the stronger one, she said softly. You always were. I just couldn't admit it. I did not say anything for a moment. Those words that I needed at 14, at 18, at 25, arrived at 30 now, and they landed differently than I had imagined they would. Softer, less urgent, because I had already given them to myself. You are not weak, Cynthia, I said. You have just been performing when you should have been building. It is not too late. She nodded, her jaw set, and in that gesture, small, quiet, new, I saw the beginning of something in her, the same something that had begun in me at 14 when the stone sank to the bottom of the well. Maybe it ran in the family after all. Aunty Ngozi came to me before the night was over. She stood before me, smaller than she had ever looked, and she said, Mirabel, what you said tonight. I waited. You were right, she said. It came out like something that had cost her. I didn't see you. I didn't see you. I am sorry. I looked at her for a long moment. The woman who looked through me at 14, the woman who spent years measuring me against my sister and finding me insufficient, she was 60-something now, and she was looking at me with the expression of a person who has just understood something they can't ununderstand. Thank you, Auntie, I said. I meant it, but I also felt very clearly that her regret, real as it was, changed nothing about what I had already built.
I did not need her to feel sorry for the building to stand. It was already standing. It will keep standing. Her regret was her weight to carry, not mine. That was the difference between who I had been and who I had become. The younger Mirabel would have needed the apology to feel complete. The woman in that room only needed to speak her truth and then release it.
I left Enugu the next morning. Mama walked me to my car in the early light, holding my arm the way she used to when I was very small, and she was navigating us through a market. "Are you all right?" she asked. "Yes, Mama." "I should have," she began and then stopped. Started again. "I saw you. I want you to know that. I saw you working, even when I didn't always say it right." I believed her, and I forgave what she was asking to be forgiven, even though she had not said the words. "I know, Mama." She held my face between her hands, the same hands that had held pots and wrappers and children for decades, warm and real and imperfect. "Your father would be so proud," she said. I got in my car. I drove back toward Lagos through the early morning, the road opening before me through the Harmattan haze, the landscape moving from the dense green of Enugu State into the long spreading flatness of the roads I had learned to move through on my own. I drove without music for a while, just the road and the light and the silence. I thought about 14-year-old Mirabel in that funeral gathering. The girl whose shoulders were touching her sister's, who was standing right there, who heard her aunt speak her sister's name with love and did not hear her own. I thought about what I would say to her if I could reach back across 16 years and find her standing there with a stone sinking quietly in her chest. I would say, let it sink. Let it go all the way to the bottom, because you are going to use it as a foundation. And what you build on it is going to be more solid and more real and more completely yours than anything they are handing out in this room today. The invisibility is a gift, not the gift they think they are giving you. They think they are giving you nothing, but a gift nonetheless. Because what you build in the dark without their eyes on it, without their approval propping it up, without their validation running through it like borrowed electricity, what you build in the dark is indestructible. They cannot take back what they never gave you, and they cannot diminish what they never saw growing. Be patient, Mirabel. Be precise. Be patient. Your moment is coming, and when it comes, you will not need to raise your voice. You will only need to arrive. I drove into Lagos as the sun came fully up. My phone showed 6 messages from cousins I had not heard from in years. A voice note from Cynthia. "Call me when you're back. I want to talk, really talk." A message from Auntie Nogozi with a prayer emoji, which made me smile. And a message from Tunde, the Ibadan client confirmed. "We are growing, partner." I pulled into my street. I parked in front of the apartment that was fully mine. I sat in the car for a moment with my hands resting in my lap, and I looked at the ordinary, beautiful morning around me. A woman sweeping her compound, a child running towards something, a man balancing a tray of bread on his bicycle as he rode past without hurrying. Normal life. Real life. Mine. Then I picked up my notebook from the passenger seat. Not the same notebook from university, but the latest in the long series of them, the current record of the thing I was building, and I opened it to a fresh page. At the top, I wrote the date, and then below it, I wrote one line. Begin. Not again, not still, not finally. Just begin. Because that is all it has ever been. Not one dramatic moment. Not one night when the room went quiet and the truth was spoken. Not one satisfying reversal where the people who got it wrong got what they deserved. Just the daily decision to begin. To pick up the notebook. To open the door of the office. To take the call. To do the work.
to be so entirely present in the building of your own life that when the moment of recognition finally comes, and it comes, I promise you it comes, you receive it lightly, gratefully, without desperation, because you did not need it to survive. You already survived. You are already here, and you are only beginning.